The scorching sun beat down on Sophia Montgomery's back as she stood in front of the abandoned homestead, her fingers clutching the crumpled telegram that had brought her to this God-forsaken stretch of Texas prairie in the summer of 1875. The journey from Boston had been arduous, but nothing compared to the humiliation that awaited her at its end. "He ain't here, miss," the station master had told her upon her arrival in Rattlesnake Springs. "Mr. Holloway took one look at you stepping off that train and rode off faster than a jackrabbit with its tail on fire." Sophia's gloved hand instinctively rose to the left side of her face, where a lattice of angry red scars stretched from her temple to her jaw, a permanent reminder of the fire that had claimed her family home and her beauty in one cruel night. The mail-order marriage had been her last hope for a future, the carefully taken photograph she'd sent showing only her unblemished right profile. Now, as she stood before the weathered cabin that was to have been her new home, she felt the last of her hope crumbling like the dry earth beneath her boots. 3 days at the town's only boarding house had exhausted nearly all her remaining funds. By this time tomorrow, she would have nowhere to go. "Madam, you planning on standing there till you take root?" The deep voice startled her, and Sophia whirled around to find a tall man astride a chestnut stallion regarding her with curiosity. His face was partially hidden beneath the wide brim of a dust-covered Stetson, but she could make out piercing blue eyes and several days' worth of stubble along a strong jaw. A weathered leather vest hung open over a faded blue shirt, and a lasso was coiled at his saddle. I was just leaving," Sophia stammered, hastily gathering her skirts to step away from what she now realized must be his property. The man dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent his life in the saddle. "This here's the old Holloway place. You know Gerald." "I was supposed to marry him." Sophia's voice was barely audible as she looked down, allowing her bonnet to shield her scars. A moment of silence passed before the cowboy let out a low whistle. "You're the Boston lady." It wasn't a question. "Yes." Sophia squared her shoulders, finding a small reserve of dignity. "Though it seems Mr. Holloway found me unsuitable upon my arrival." The man stepped closer, his spurs jangling softly in the dirt. "Name's Zachary Reid. Most folks call me Zach." He extended a calloused hand. "And Gerald Holloway is a damn fool, if you'll pardon my language." Sophia hesitated before accepting his handshake, keeping her face angled away. "Sophia Montgomery." "Well, Miss Montgomery, what's your plan now?" His directness caught her off guard. I don't have one," she admitted, hating the tremor in her voice. "I have enough for perhaps one more night at Mrs. Wilson's boarding house, and then—" Zach Reid studied her for a long moment. "You eaten today?" The unexpected question made her blink. "No, sir." "Then I reckon that's where we start." He gestured toward his horse. "My ranch is a few miles north. My housekeeper, Mrs. Beckett, always makes enough to feed an army. You'd be welcome to join us." Sophia's pride warred with her hunger and desperation. "I couldn't impose. It's just a meal, Miss Montgomery, and maybe we can figure out what's next while you get some food in you." His voice softened. "This country ain't kind to those without friends." The sincerity in his tone made her finally look up, allowing him to see her face fully for the first time. She braced herself for the familiar flicker of revulsion. But Zachary Reid's expression didn't change. His eyes met hers steadily, taking in the scarred tissue without flinching. "My horse, Brutus, doesn't much like strangers, but he's gentle enough once he knows you. May I help you up?" Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. With surprising gentleness, Zach lifted her onto the saddle before swinging up behind her. As they rode away from the abandoned hopes of her mail-order marriage, Sophia found herself wondering if perhaps fate had a different plan for her in this harsh, beautiful wilderness. The Reid Ranch was nothing like the grand estates Sophia had known in her former life, but it possessed a rugged charm that immediately spoke of hard work and care. A sprawling single-story house with a wide porch stood as the centerpiece, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn that needed a fresh coat of paint. In the distance, cattle grazed on rolling hills that stretched toward the horizon. It ain't much compared to Boston, I expect, Zach said as he helped her down from the horse. It's lovely, Sophia replied honestly. After days of uncertainty, the solid permanence of the place felt reassuring. A gray-haired woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Zachary Reid, you bring home strays more often than that old tomcat of yours, she called, though her tone held more affection than censure. Mrs. Beckett, this is Miss Sophia Montgomery from Boston. Miss Montgomery, this is Mrs. Eleanor Beckett, who keeps this place and me from falling into complete disarray. How do you do? Sophia greeted, automatically slipping into the formal manners of her upbringing, Mrs. Beckett's sharp eyes took in Sophia's travel-worn appearance and the visible scars, but like Zach, she showed no reaction to the latter. I've got beef stew that's been simmering since morning, fresh bread and apple pie cooling on the windowsill. You look like you could use all three, child. Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable, with solid, well-made furniture and shelves lined with books, an unexpected touch that made Sophia's heart lift slightly. As she washed up at the basin Mrs. Beckett provided, she caught her reflection in the small mirror and quickly turned away, a habit formed over the past 3 years. The stew was hearty and delicious, the first proper meal Sophia had eaten in days. As her hunger abated, she became increasingly aware of Zach watching her from across the table, his expression thoughtful. So, he finally said, Gerald Holloway. Sophia set down her spoon. Yes, we corresponded for 6 months. He seemed kind in his letters. Holloway's got a decent spread, but the man's all hat and no cattle when it comes to character, Zach said, earning a reproving look from Mrs. Beckett. Beg pardon, but it's true. I'm guessing he didn't know about my scars, no. Sophia's hand unconsciously rose to her face again. The photograph I sent showed only my right profile. It was deceptive, I know. Sounds like survival to me, Mrs. Beckett interjected, refilling Sophia's cup with strong, sweet coffee. A woman alone needs to use what advantages she has. Zach nodded slowly. What happened, if you don't mind my asking? Sophia stared into her coffee cup, finding it easier than meeting his direct gaze. A fire 3 years ago. Our cook left a lantern too close to the curtains. I was reading in the library when I smelled the smoke. She swallowed hard. I tried to reach my parents' room, but the hallway, the heat was too intense. A beam fell. By the time the fireman pulled me out, my face. She trailed off, the memories still too painful to articulate fully. And your folks, Zach asked quietly. They didn't survive. Nor did my younger brother. The words came out flat, rehearsed from too many tellings. After I recovered, I discovered my father's investments had failed. The creditors took everything except a small trust my maternal grandmother had established for me. It was enough to live on modestly, but not enough to overcome being unmarriageable in Boston society, Mrs. Beckett finished for her, disapproval clear in her voice. Yes, Sophia looked up finally. When I saw Mr. Holloway's advertisement for a bride, it seemed like providence. A fresh start, away from pitying glances and whispered comments. Zach's jaw tightened, only to arrive and find more of the same. Worse, Sophia said softly. At least in Boston, they rejected me to my face. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen, broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock and the distant lowing of cattle. You could stay here tonight, Mrs. Beckett offered suddenly. I've fresh linens on the guest bed, and it would save you the trip back to town. Sophia's eyes widened. Oh, I couldn't. You could and you should, the older woman insisted. Tomorrow's soon enough to figure out what's next. Zach nodded his agreement. Mrs. Beckett's right. We've got plenty of room, and it's going to be dark soon. The kindness of these strangers nearly undid Sophia's composure. Thank you, she managed, blinking back tears. I don't know how I'll repay your kindness, but nonsense, Mrs. Beckett cut her off. In this country, we help each other. That's payment enough. Later, as Sophia lay in the small but comfortable guest room, she could hear the low murmur of voices from the kitchen. Zach and Mrs. Beckett discussing her situation, no doubt. Under normal circumstances, she might have felt indignant at being the subject of such a conversation, but exhaustion and relief overcame pride. For the first time since receiving Gerald Holloway's letter of invitation, Sophia slept deeply and without dreams. Morning brought the sounds and smells of ranch life, roosters crowing, cattle in the distance, the aroma of bacon frying and coffee brewing. For a disorienting moment, Sophia couldn't remember where she was. Then yesterday's events came rushing back and she sat up, running a hand through her tangled auburn hair. Mrs. Beckett had left a basin of fresh water, a bar of lavender soap, and a clean towel on the dresser. After washing and dressing in the same travel-worn clothes she'd worn the day before, Sophia made her way to the kitchen, where she found the housekeeper alone, kneading bread dough with practiced movements. "Good morning, child. Sleep well. Better than I have in weeks," Sophia admitted. "Thank you again for your hospitality. Sit and have some breakfast. Zach's been out since dawn. Calving season keeps everyone busy, but he said to tell you he'd be back mid-morning to discuss matters." "Matters?" Sophia echoed, accepting a plate of eggs and bacon, Mrs. Beckett's expression was neutral as she punched down the bread dough. "Your situation, I expect." Anxiety fluttered in Sophia's chest. She had no claim on these people's kindness, yet she had nowhere else to go. The thought of returning to Rattlesnake Springs, of facing the stares and whispers, made her stomach clench. True to his word, Zach returned as the grandfather clock in the hall was striking 10. His shirt was damp with sweat, and there were smudges of dirt on his forearms, but his eyes were clear and direct as ever when they met Sophia's across the kitchen. "Miss Montgomery," he greeted, washing his hands at the pump sink. "Hope you slept well." "I did, thank you." "And please call me Sophia." He nodded, accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Beckett before sitting across from her at the table. "Sophia, then, I've been thinking about your predicament." She braced herself. Here it comes, she thought. The gentle suggestion that she return east, perhaps with an offer of train fare out of pity. "The town's school teacher, Miss Abernathy, is leaving at the end of the month to marry a man in Denver. The school board's been advertising for a replacement, but so far there have been no takers." Zach took a sip of his coffee. "You mentioned you were reading when the fire broke out. Are you educated?" Sophia blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected turn of the conversation. "Yes, I attended Miss Porter's school for girls in Connecticut. I'm proficient in literature, mathematics, history, French, and basic sciences." "Can you handle children? Some of the ranch hands youngsters can be a handful." Yes, I believe so. I tutored younger students at school." Zach nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "The position comes with a small salary and lodging. There's a cottage behind the schoolhouse. It's modest, but it's private." Sophia's mind raced to catch up with what he was suggesting. "You think the school board would hire me, a stranger with no teaching credentials?" "This ain't Boston," Zach said with a slight smile. "Out here, being willing and able counts for more than fancy papers. Besides, I happen to know that Mayor Thompson's wife is on the school board, and she's desperate to find someone before the new term starts." Hope, that dangerous emotion she'd tried to extinguish, flickered to life in Sophia's chest. "But my face, the children might be frightened." Zach's expression grew serious. "Children can be cruel, I won't pretend otherwise. But they can also be remarkably accepting once their curiosity is satisfied. I'd wager that after a week, they'll be more concerned with whether you assign homework on Fridays than with your scars." Mrs. Beckett, who had been quietly working at the stove, turned to face them. "It's a good solution, child. You'd have independence, purpose, and time to decide if this country suits you." Sophia's voice caught as gratitude welled up. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let me introduce you to Mrs. Thompson this afternoon," Zach replied simply. "The rest will follow." 3 hours later, Sophia found herself seated in the parlor of the mayor's substantial home on the outskirts of Rattlesnake Springs, acutely aware of her wrinkled traveling clothes and the steady gaze of Harriet Thompson, a formidable woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and shrewd eyes. "Miss Montgomery, while your educational background is impressive, teaching in a frontier town is quite different from attending a finishing school in the East," Mrs. Thompson was saying. "Our children range from 6 to 16, and many of them will attend school only until they're needed full-time on their family ranches or in the mines. I understand, Sophia replied, forcing herself to maintain eye contact despite the woman's occasional glances at her scars. I believe education should be practical as well as enriching. These children deserve skills that will serve them in the lives they'll lead. Mrs. Thompson's eyebrows rose slightly. And you feel you can provide that? I can teach them to read, write, calculate, and understand the world beyond these mountains. Whether they use those skills to run a ranch, keep a store's accounts, or continue their education elsewhere should be their choice, but they should have the foundation to make that choice. From his position by the window, Zach made a small sound of approval, which Mrs. Thompson acknowledged with a brief glance before returning her attention to Sophia. And your condition, children can be quite direct in their curiosity. Sophia had anticipated this question. I would address it honestly on the first day. I was injured in a fire that took my family. My scars are a reminder of both loss and survival. They don't affect my ability to teach or to care for my students. For the first time, Mrs. Thompson's severe expression softened slightly. Well said. She rose from her chair. The school term begins in 3 weeks. The cottage will need cleaning and you'll need to review the previous teacher's materials. The salary is $30 a month with the cottage and its furnishings provided. Sophia stood as well, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Does that mean? It means the position is yours, Miss Montgomery, provided you're still interested after seeing the schoolhouse. Mrs. Thompson's tone was brisk but not unkind. Mr. Reid, perhaps you'd be good enough to show Miss Montgomery her new workplace while I draft a letter of appointment for the board's records. Zach tipped his hat. Be my pleasure, Mrs. Thompson. As they stepped out into the afternoon sunshine, Sophia felt lightheaded with relief and disbelief. Did that really just happen? Zach's laugh was warm and genuine. It did indeed. Harriet Thompson doesn't waste time once her mind's made up and you impressed her. I didn't expect. I hoped, but you earned it, he said simply. Come on, let's go see your new domain. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a sturdy white clapboard building with a small bell tower. Inside, it was a single large room with rows of wooden desks facing a teacher's desk on a raised platform. A blackboard covered most of the front wall, and tall windows let in ample light. Behind the building, connected by a narrow walkway, stood a small cottage with a porch just large enough for a rocking chair. It's perfect, Sophia breathed as they explored the 2-room dwelling. The main room served as both parlor and kitchen, with a cast-iron stove, a small table with 2 chairs, a bookshelf, and a comfortable-looking armchair. The bedroom was tiny but contained a brass bed, a wardrobe, and a washstand. It needs a woman's touch, Zach observed, running a finger through the dust on the mantel, but it's solid and dry. It's more than I dared hope for. Sophia turned in a small circle, trying to imagine herself living here, teaching in the schoolhouse, building a life in this remote town. I can hardly believe my good fortune. Zach was watching her, his expression unreadable. What would you have done if I hadn't found you at Holloway's place yesterday? The question sobered her. Truthfully, I don't know. My funds would have run out by the end of the week. I suppose I would have had to find work as a maid or laundress if anyone would have me. Well, now you won't have to find out. His voice was gruff, but there was something like satisfaction in his eyes. Mrs. Beckett and I can help you get settled here over the next few days. She's already talking about curtains and such. Why are you doing this? Sophia asked suddenly. You don't know me, you have no obligation to help me. Zach was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving from her face to the window where the distant mountains were visible. My mother came west as a mail-order bride, he finally said. Her husband, not my father, was cruel to her. She ran away after a year pregnant with me. A rancher and his wife took her in, gave her work and shelter until she died birthing me. His eyes returned to hers. They raised me as their own. Taught me that kindness isn't an obligation, it's how we survive out here. Sophia's throat tightened with emotion. Then I'm doubly grateful for the help and for the lesson. A shadow of a smile crossed his face. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've met some of your future students. The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Mrs. Beckett proved to be a formidable ally, enlisting the wives of several ranch hands to help clean and prepare the schoolteacher's cottage. Curtains appeared for the windows, along with a colorful quilt for the bed, a braided rug for the floor, and various kitchen implements that transformed the bare dwelling into a home. Zach brought a bookshelf he'd built himself, explaining gruffly that he'd had the lumber lying around anyway. He also introduced Sophia to most of the families whose children would be her students, standing steadfastly beside her as curious eyes inevitably found their way to her scars. True to his prediction, once the initial surprise passed, most people seemed more interested in her educational philosophy than her appearance. The night before the school term was to begin, Sophia sat on her small porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Despite her nervousness about tomorrow, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since before the fire. She had a home, a purpose, and most surprisingly, friends. The sound of approaching hoofbeats broke into her reverie. Moments later, Zach appeared on his chestnut stallion, carrying a small wooden crate. "Evening, schoolmarm," he greeted, dismounting with his usual grace. "Thought you might need some fortification for tomorrow." Sophia smiled at the nickname that had already become familiar. "Please join me." "There's coffee on the stove." Inside her cozy cottage, Zach set the crate on the table and removed its contents: a jar of honey, a bag of hard candies, an apple, and a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Traditional gifts for a teacher," he explained with a slight flush to his weathered cheeks. "Though I reckon you'll get plenty of apples tomorrow." "They're perfect," Sophia said, arranging the flowers in a mason jar with water. "Though I'm not sure about the traditional part, did you give Miss Abernathy honey and candies on her first day?" Zach's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Can't say that I did, but Miss Abernathy was 53 and had a face like a thundercloud." Sophia laughed, a sound that still surprised her with its freedom. 3 weeks ago, she'd thought she'd never laugh again. They sat together, drinking coffee and talking about inconsequential things as twilight deepened into night. There was an ease between them now, born of shared work and quiet conversations. Sophia found herself studying his face in the lamplight, the strong jaw, the laugh lines around his eyes, the way his dark hair curled slightly where it met his collar. "Penny for your thoughts?" Zach asked, catching her gaze. Sophia felt a blush warming her cheeks. "I was just thinking how different my life is from what I expected when I left Boston." "Better or worse, different," she repeated, "but with promise I hadn't dared hope for." Zach nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. Sometimes for the better, even when it doesn't seem so at first." As he rose to leave, he hesitated, then reached out to briefly touch her hand where it rested on the table. "You'll do fine tomorrow, Sophia. Those kids are lucky to have you." The warmth of his touch lingered long after he'd gone, leaving Sophia to wonder at the strange, fluttering sensation in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced since she was a young girl in her first season of Boston society, before fire and fate had altered her path forever. The first day of school dawned clear and cool, with the promise of autumn in the air. Sophia had been awake since before sunrise, too nervous to sleep. She dressed with care in her best dress, a practical navy blue with a white collar, and arranged her hair to partially shield the left side of her face without appearing to hide it. By 8 o'clock, children began arriving at the schoolhouse, some on foot from town, others on horseback or in wagons from outlying ranches. Parents accompanied the youngest ones, eyeing Sophia with a mixture of curiosity and evaluation. By 8:30, 23 students ranging from 6 to 16 years old were seated at the desks, watching her with expressions that ranged from open curiosity to adolescent indifference. Sophia took a deep breath and rang the small bell on her desk. "Good morning." "I'm Miss Montgomery, your new teacher." A chorus of "Good morning," Miss Montgomery answered her, clearly a routine drilled into them by Miss Abernathy. "Before we begin our lessons, I'd like to address what some of you may be wondering about." Sophia's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. As you can see, I have scars on my face from a fire that happened 3 years ago. You may be curious about them, which is natural, but I would prefer if we could satisfy that curiosity now so that we can focus on our studies afterward. A small hand shot up in the front row. It belonged to a gap-toothed girl of about 7. Yes, miss. Sally Jenkins, madam. Did it hurt awful bad? Sophia appreciated the directness. Yes, Sally, it did, but the doctors gave me medicine to help with the pain and it doesn't hurt anymore. Another hand rose a boy of about 12. Tommy Wilson, miss, can you still see out of that eye? Yes, my vision wasn't affected. The questions continued for several minutes. Could she feel it if she touched the scars? Yes. Would they ever go away? No. Was she sad about how she looked? Sometimes, but she was grateful to be alive. Finally, a tall boy at the back, one of the oldest students, raised his hand. Jacob Thompson, miss. My ma says you came west to marry Mr. Holloway, but he took one look at you and ran. His tone wasn't malicious, merely matter of fact, but several of the other children gasped. Sophia felt her cheeks burn but kept her composure. That's partially correct, Jacob. I did come to marry Mr. Holloway and he did change his mind upon meeting me, but that's why I'm here now as your teacher, so perhaps everything worked out as it should. My pa says Mr. Holloway is a fool, piped up a small boy near the front. He says any man who judges a woman by her face instead of her heart ain't worth spit. Billy Jenkins. His sister Sally exclaimed, You ain't supposed to say spit in school. A ripple of laughter broke the tension and Sophia found herself smiling. Thank you for your father's assessment, Billy. Now I think we've satisfied our curiosity about my appearance. From this point forward, I'd like us to focus on what's truly important, your education. With that, she turned to the blackboard and began writing out the day's lessons, aware that a significant hurdle had been crossed. There would be difficult moments ahead, she was certain, but this first challenge had been met successfully. By the time the school day ended at 3 o'clock, Sophia was exhausted but exhilarated. The children had been attentive and respectful, for the most part, and she'd already begun to identify which students would need extra help and which would require more challenging work to keep them engaged. As the last wagon pulled away, carrying the Jenkins siblings and the Wilsons toward their neighboring ranches, Sophia sat on the schoolhouse steps, allowing herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She'd done it, faced a classroom full of children, addressed their curiosity about her scars head-on, and begun the work she'd been hired to do. Looks like you survived. She looked up to find Zach approaching on foot, leading his horse. His smile was warm with pride. I did more than survive, Sophia replied, returning his smile. I think I may actually be good at this. Never doubted it for a minute. He sat beside her on the step, close enough that she could smell the leather and sunshine scent of him. Tell me about your first day, schoolmarm. As Sophia recounted the day's events, she was struck by how natural it felt to share these moments with him, how quickly he had become someone whose opinion mattered to her, whose approval she valued. It was a dangerous path for her heart, she knew. Zachary Reid was kind to her, yes, but he had shown no indication that his interest was anything but friendly. And she, with her scars and her broken past, had no business dreaming of more. Yet as they sat together in the golden afternoon light, talking and laughing, Sophia couldn't help the small, tender hope that had begun to take root in her heart, a hope as fragile and persistent as the wildflowers that grew in the harsh prairie soil. Autumn settled over Rattlesnake Springs, painting the surrounding hills in russet and gold. Sophia found herself settling into a routine, weekdays spent teaching, evenings preparing lessons and grading papers, Saturday mornings shopping in town for supplies. Sunday afternoons often found her at the Reid Ranch for dinner, a standing invitation from Mrs. Beckett that Sophia suspected had Zach's endorsement behind it. Those Sunday visits became the highlight of her week. Sometimes other ranch hands and their families would join them, filling the house with laughter and conversation. Other times, it would be just the three of them, Sophia, Zach, and Mrs. Beckett, sharing a meal and stories as if they'd known each other for years instead of months. On one such Sunday in late October, Sophia arrived to find Mrs. Beckett preparing to leave. "My sister's taken ill in San Antonio," the older woman explained, bustling about the kitchen as she gave last-minute instructions to Zach. "I'm taking the afternoon train and won't be back for at least a week, maybe longer." "Oh, I'm so sorry," Sophia said. "Is there anything I can do to help? You can make sure this one doesn't burn down the kitchen trying to cook for himself, Mrs." Beckett replied, nodding toward Zach with affectionate exasperation. "I've left stew for tonight and tomorrow, but after that." "I'm not completely helpless," Zach protested, though his expression suggested otherwise. "I'd be happy to bring over some meals," Sophia offered. "It's the least I can do after all your kindness." And so a new pattern emerged. Each evening after school, Sophia would prepare a simple meal in her cottage, then ride the mare Zach had lent her out to the Reid ranch. They would eat together in the kitchen, talking about their days, her students' progress, his challenges with the herd, books they'd both read, memories of places they'd been. On the fourth such evening, as they washed dishes side by side, Zach asked the question she'd been dreading. "Do you ever think about going back east?" Sophia's hands stilled in the soapy water. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not in the way you might think. I wonder how my old friends are faring if the places I loved have changed, but I don't wish to return, even though life would be easier there." "More comfortable, would it?" She glanced at him. "I had wealth and comfort before, but also constraints I didn't recognize until they were gone. Here, I'm judged more by what I do than by my appearance or family connections. That's worth some discomfort." Zach was quiet for a moment, drying a plate with methodical care. "And the loneliness, a young woman like you should have, more," Sophia felt her heart quicken. Was he asking what she thought he was asking? More family, companionship. His eyes remained fixed on the plate in his hands. "Love." "I have friends here," she said carefully. "You and Mrs. Beckett, some of the parents of my students. It's more than I had in Boston after the fire." "That's not what I meant." "I know." Sophia took a deep breath. "Zach, look at me," he did, his blue eyes meeting hers directly. "The first time you saw me, you didn't flinch from my scars. Do you know what that meant to me? After 3 years of averted gazes and barely concealed revulsion." Her voice trembled slightly. "But I'm not naive. Friendship is one thing, romance is another." "Is it?" Zach's voice was quiet, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made her breath catch. "Sophia, do you think I invite every new schoolteacher to dinner every Sunday, or spend my evenings talking about books and childhood memories?" Before she could respond, he set down the dish towel and gently took her hands in his. "I see you," he said simply. "Not just your scars, though they're part of you. I see your strength, your kindness, your sharp mind. I see how Tommy Wilson has improved his reading because you stay late to help him. I see how you've brought wildflowers into your cottage to remind you of beauty, even when winter's coming." Tears blurred Sophia's vision. "Zach, I'm not asking for anything," he continued. "I just wanted you to know that if you ever thought no man could see beyond the scars, you're wrong." The moment hung between them, fraught with unspoken emotions. Then, with a gentleness that broke her heart, Zach raised one of her hands to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles before releasing her. "It's getting late," he said. "I should see you home." The ride back to her cottage was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. At her door, Zach helped her down from the mare, his hands lingering at her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "Good night, Sophia," he said softly. "Good night, Zach." She wanted to say more, so much more, but the words caught in her throat. As she watched him ride away into the darkness, Sophia raised a trembling hand to her scarred cheek, wondering if she dared believe that someone could love her as she was now, not despite her scars, but with them as part of who she had become. The next afternoon, as Sophia was dismissing her students, an unfamiliar wagon pulled up to the schoolhouse. A well-dressed man in his early 30s stepped down, his attire marking him as a city dweller rather than a local rancher or merchant. "Miss Montgomery?" he inquired as the last of the children scattered. "I'm Andrew Calloway, Gerald Holloway's cousin." Sophia stiffened. "Mr. Calloway, what brings you to Rattlesnake Springs? Business with my cousin, primarily." But when I heard about you, I felt compelled to offer my apologies for Gerald's behavior. His expression seemed genuinely contrite. He's always been, well, there's no polite way to say it. He's a shallow man who judges books by their covers. That's kind of you to say, but no apology is necessary, Sophia replied, gathering her books. Things have worked out for the best, so I've heard. The school teacher is quite popular from what the townspeople tell me. He smiled, revealing even white teeth. I wonder if I might call on you sometime during my stay, perhaps take you to dinner at the hotel. Sophia hesitated, taken aback by the unexpected invitation. Andrew Calloway was handsome and seemed courteous, a far cry from his cousin. In Boston, before the fire, she would have been flattered by his attention. That's very kind, Mr. Calloway, but please call me Andrew. And before you refuse, let me be clear, I'm not blind, Miss Montgomery. I can see your scars. I simply find them less interesting than your reputation as an excellent teacher and a woman of character. His directness was disarming, reminiscent of Zach's straightforward manner. Still, something held her back. I appreciate your candor, Mr. Calloway Andrew. But I'm quite busy with my teaching duties. Perhaps Sunday then. I understand the school doesn't hold sessions on the Sabbath. Sophia thought of her standing dinner invitation at the Reid Ranch. After last night's conversation with Zach, the prospect of seeing him again filled her with both anticipation and anxiety. Yet wasn't this what she had come west for? A chance at a normal life, including courtship. Sunday afternoon would be acceptable, she found herself saying. Though I have a prior engagement in the evening, Andrew's smile widened. Excellent, I'll call for you at 2 o'clock if that suits. After he had gone, Sophia remained on the schoolhouse steps, wondering at her decision. Why had she accepted? Was it genuine interest in Andrew Calloway? Or was it fear of the feelings Zach had stirred in her feelings that, if pursued, would make her vulnerable to heartbreak in a way she hadn't been since before the fire? That evening, as she graded arithmetic exercises by lamplight, a knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Zach standing on her porch, hat in hand. I was in town, he explained, and thought I'd check if you needed anything. Mrs. Beckett sent a telegram that she'll be staying another week with her sister. That's thoughtful of you. Sophia stepped back. Please come in, I just made tea. As they sat at her small table, an awkwardness hung between them that hadn't been there before his near confession 2 nights ago. Sophia found herself chattering about her students, filling the silence with school anecdotes until Zach finally interrupted her. Sophia, he said gently, are you avoiding talking about the other night? She set down her teacup. Perhaps I'm not sure what to say. You don't have to say anything. I meant what I told you. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I met Gerald Holloway's cousin today, she blurted out. Andrew Calloway, he asked to call on me Sunday afternoon, and I accepted. Zach's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, a momentary shadow quickly controlled. I see, and Sunday evening, I told him I had a prior engagement. A slight smile touched his lips. Good, Mrs. Beckett would be disappointed if you missed her welcome home dinner. Zach. Sophia reached across the table to touch his hand. I don't know why I said yes to him, maybe because it seemed like what I'm supposed to do, accept a gentleman's invitation, or maybe I'm afraid. Of what? Of believing that someone like you could truly care for someone like me. Of trusting that it's real and not pity or kindness masquerading as something deeper. Zach turned his hand beneath hers, entwining their fingers. Sophia Montgomery, I've never pitied you a day in my life, admired you, respected you, enjoyed your company, yes, but pity. No. The conviction in his voice made her throat tighten with emotion. Then what is this between us? Something worth exploring if you're willing. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. But I won't rush you, and I won't stand in the way if Andrew Calloway turns out to be the man who makes you happy. The selflessness of his statement only confirmed what Sophia already knew in her heart, that Zachary Reid was a rare man, one who saw beyond surfaces to the truth beneath. Whether she was ready to embrace what that meant for her future remained to be seen. Sunday afternoon arrived with clear skies and unseasonably warm weather. Sophia wore her second-best dress, a forest green that complemented her auburn hair. She'd arranged her hair in a simple updo that neither hid nor emphasized her scars. Andrew Calloway arrived precisely at 2, driving a handsome buggy. He complimented her appearance with practiced ease and suggested a drive to see the autumn colors in the foothills before returning to town for refreshments at the hotel. As they drove, Andrew proved to be an engaging conversationalist, telling her about his business ventures in Denver and his travels throughout the West. He asked intelligent questions about her teaching methods and listened attentively to her responses. By any measure, it was a pleasant outing with a courteous gentleman, yet Sophia found herself making mental comparisons throughout the afternoon. Andrew's polished manners versus Zach's straightforward honesty. Andrew's well-tailored suit versus Zach's practical ranch attire. Andrew's cultivated conversation versus Zach's genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. When they returned to the hotel's dining room for coffee and cake, Andrew leaned forward with an earnest expression. "Miss Montgomery, Sophia, if I may, I've enjoyed our afternoon immensely. I'll be in Rattlesnake Springs for another week on business, and I'd like to see you again. Perhaps dinner tomorrow evening." Sophia hesitated, searching her feelings. Andrew was everything she had once thought she wanted in a potential husband: cultured, successful, comfortable in society. He had been nothing but respectful regarding her scars, mentioning them only once to assure her they didn't diminish her in his eyes. Yet something was missing, that spark of connection she felt whenever Zach entered a room, the sense of being truly seen rather than merely accepted. "You're very kind, Andrew, but I'm not sure that would be wise," she said finally. "I've enjoyed our afternoon as well, but I think my heart may be otherwise engaged." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "The rancher, Reid, isn't it? The townspeople mentioned you spend a good deal of time at his ranch." Sophia felt a blush warming her cheeks. "Mr. Reid has been a good friend to me since my arrival." Andrew nodded slowly. "Just a word of caution, if I may. Men like Reid, rough-hewn, isolated, they can seem romantic to a woman of refinement. But consider whether such a man can truly appreciate a woman of your background and education, whether he can provide the life you deserve." "The life I deserve," Sophia repeated, a note of steel entering her voice. "Mr. Calloway, 3 years ago I learned that life doesn't concern itself with what we think we deserve. It gives us challenges and opportunities, and our character is revealed in how we respond to them." Zachary Reid faced the challenge of finding a scarred, abandoned woman with compassion and respect. "What life I deserve is beside the point. I know the kind of person I want to share it with." Andrew's expression shifted from surprise to reluctant admiration. "Well said, Miss Montgomery. It seems your mind is made up." "It is," she realized as she spoke the words. "I believe it has been for some time." By the time Andrew returned her to the schoolteacher's cottage, the sun was beginning to set. They parted amicably, with Andrew wishing her happiness and Sophia thanking him for a pleasant afternoon. As his buggy pulled away, Sophia hurried inside to change for dinner at the Reid Ranch, her heart lighter than it had been in days. The ride to the ranch took longer than usual, as Sophia kept the mare at a walk, using the time to gather her thoughts. What would she say to Zach? How could she express the clarity she'd found during her afternoon with Andrew? As the ranch house came into view, silhouetted against the sunset, Sophia noticed something unusual: a wagon she didn't recognize parked outside, and several horses tethered nearby. It seemed Zach had other visitors. Her suspicion was confirmed when she entered the kitchen to find not only Zach but 4 other men seated around the table, playing cards. They scrambled to their feet at her entrance, hats coming off as Zach made introductions. Ranch hands from neighboring properties, apparently gathered for their monthly poker game. "I'm sorry," Sophia said, flustered. "I didn't realize you had company. I can come back another time." "Nonsense," Zach replied, though there was a tension in his smile that hadn't been there before. "We're nearly finished. Please make yourself comfortable in the parlor. There's coffee on the stove." Confused by his distant manner, Sophia retreated to the parlor with a cup of coffee. Through the partially open door, she could hear the men's conversation resuming. "Lucky man, Reid," one of them commented, "spending Sunday evenings with a pretty schoolteacher." "It ain't like that, Davis," Zach's voice replied, though Sophia thought she detected a note of defensiveness. "Miss Montgomery is a friend. She's been kind enough to help out while Mrs. Beckett's away." "If you say so," another voice chimed in, "though half the town's betting on when you'll make it official. Then half the town's going to lose their money," Zach said flatly. "Miss Montgomery's got prospects. Saw her riding with Holloway's cousin earlier today. City man like that's probably more her style anyway." The casual dismissal stung like a physical blow. After their conversation the other night, how could he think she would prefer Andrew Calloway? Unless Zach had reconsidered his feelings. Perhaps in the clear light of day, away from the intimacy of dishwashing and lamplight, he'd realized that friendship was all he wanted from her after all. Embarrassment and hurt warred within her as she set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. She wouldn't sit here and listen to more, wouldn't impose her presence where it clearly wasn't desired. Quietly, she slipped out the front door and untethered her mare, mounting awkwardly in her Sunday dress. She was halfway down the drive when she heard hoofbeats behind her. "Sophia, wait." She reined in the mare, turning to find Zach galloping toward her, his expression troubled. "Where are you going?" he demanded as he pulled his horse alongside hers. "Home," she replied, her voice brittle with hurt. "I don't wish to intrude on your gathering." "You're not intruding." "I invited you, remember?" "Yes, but that was before you had other plans, and apparently before you decided that I would prefer the company of city men like Andrew Calloway." Zach winced. "You heard that." "I did." Sophia lifted her chin. "What I don't understand is why you would say such a thing after what you told me the other night." He removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture of frustration. "Because I saw you with him today, riding in that fancy buggy, looking like you belonged there. And I thought, maybe you realized you could do better than a rancher with dirt under his fingernails." "Is that what you think of me, that I'm so shallow?" Tears pricked at her eyes. "Zach, I spent the entire afternoon comparing Andrew to you, and he came up wanting in every way that matters." Zach went very still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when Andrew asked to see me again, I told him my heart was otherwise engaged." Sophia's voice softened. "I told him I knew what kind of man I wanted to share my life with." The look that transformed Zach's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountain's disbelief, giving way to dawning hope, and finally to a joy so pure it took her breath away. "Sophia," he breathed, reaching across the space between their horses to take her hand. "Are you sure? A life out here isn't easy, especially for someone raised with the comforts you knew." "I'm sure," she replied simply. "The only question is whether you still feel as you did the other night." In answer, Zach urged his horse closer until they were knee to knee. Then, with exquisite gentleness, he cupped her face in his hands, both the smooth right side and the scarred left, and kissed her. It was a kiss of revelation and promise, of questions answered and new ones posed. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "I see strength in everyone," he murmured, his thumb tracing one of the scars along her cheekbone. "Every mark tells me you faced the worst and survived. How could I not love a woman with such courage?" Sophia's heart soared at the word love, spoken so naturally, as if it had always been there between them, waiting to be acknowledged. "And I love you," she whispered back, "for seeing me, truly seeing me when others looked away." They might have remained there, suspended in that perfect moment, if not for a chorus of whoops and hollers from the direction of the ranch house. Sophia looked over Zach's shoulder to see the poker players gathered on the porch, raising their hats and cheering, "Davis." Zach called without turning around. "You and the boys finish your game and clear out. Miss Montgomery and I have some matters to discuss." "Sure thing, Reid," came the laughing reply. "Just remember, half the town's owed money when you make it official." As the men's laughter faded, Zach turned back to Sophia with a rueful smile. "I apologize for my friends. Subtlety isn't their strong suit." "I don't mind," she replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. After years of pitying glances and whispered comments, there was something refreshing about such open, good-natured teasing. Though I am curious about this bet. Ah, that. Zach's expression turned sheepish. Seems the town's been wagering on when I'd get around to courting you properly, Mrs. Thompson's got money on Christmas, I heard. And when were you planning to start this proper courtship? Sophia asked, arching an eyebrow. I believe I just did. He gestured to the space between them. Unless you'd prefer more traditional methods. Calling at your cottage on Sunday afternoons, walks after church, that sort of thing. I think we're beyond that, don't you? Her smile softened the words. After all, we've been having dinner together for weeks, discussing books and childhood memories. Some might say we've been courting all along. Some might, Zach agreed, his eyes warm with affection. And some might say a man who knows his own mind shouldn't waste time with extended courtships when he's found the woman he wants to spend his life with. Sophia's breath caught. Zach, I'm not proposing yet, he clarified. When I do, it'll be proper down on one knee, ring in hand. But I want you to know that's where my heart is headed, Sophia Montgomery, toward a life with you, if you'll have me. The simplicity and certainty of his declaration moved her deeply. In Boston society, courtship had been a careful dance of propriety and calculation, with marriage often more a merger of families than a union of hearts. This straightforward acknowledgement of feeling and intention was as refreshing as the clear mountain air. I can't think of anything I want more, she replied honestly. Though perhaps we should observe some proprieties for the sake of my position as schoolteacher. Mrs. Thompson might have opinions about 2 hasty engagements. Zach laughed. Fair enough. I'll court you properly, or at least properly, by Rattlesnake Springs standards. Starting with escorting you home this evening, after we've had the dinner Mrs. Beckett would be scandalized to know I nearly forgot about. As they rode back to the ranch house, side by side in the gathering twilight, Sophia felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The journey that had begun with rejection and heartbreak had led her here to this place, this man, this unexpected happiness. Her scars, once a source of shame and isolation, had become the path to finding someone who saw beyond surfaces to the truth within. Winter descended on Rattlesnake Springs with a vengeance, bringing snow that blanketed the hills and turned the town into a Christmas card scene. School continued through the cold months, with Sophia adding extra wood to the stove on particularly bitter mornings and organizing spelling bees and recitations to keep cabin fever at bay among her students. True to his word, Zach courted her with a blend of traditional gestures and practical consideration. He escorted her to church on Sundays, brought her wildflowers preserved in wax from his autumn gatherings, and made sure her woodpile was always stacked high against the cold. More precious than these gifts were the evenings spent reading aloud by her fireplace, his deep voice bringing characters to life as she mended or graded papers. The town watched their courtship with approving eyes. Far from being scandalized by Sophia's scarred appearance, most seemed to consider Zach a fortunate man to have won the affections of the educated, kind-hearted schoolteacher. Mrs. Thompson, upon winning the town betting pool when Zach formally asked to court Sophia at Christmas, donated her winnings to the school building fund with a satisfied smile. By February, when the worst of winter's grip had eased, rumors began circulating that Zach had been seen at Jensen's Jewelry in the county seat, examining rings. Sophia pretended not to hear when Sally Jenkins solemnly informed her that Mr. Reid was buying you a sparkly thing, Miss Montgomery. Though her heart beat faster at the thought, the proposal, when it came, wasn't the formal affair Zach had initially described. Instead, it happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening as they walked back from a school board meeting where plans for spring improvements to the schoolhouse had been discussed. I was thinking, Zach said casually as they approached her cottage, that building in addition to the schoolhouse makes sense with the town growing. Sophia agreed, distracted by thoughts of the new books she hoped to order. Though I'm not sure where we'll find the funds for both that and the new desks. And I was also thinking, he continued in the same conversational tone, that we might consider building an addition to my house as well. Your house. Sophia glanced at him, confused. What kind of addition? A proper library, for one thing. Those books of yours deserve better shelves than I've built so far. And maybe a music room. You mentioned once that you played the piano before coming west. Understanding began to dawn as he took her hands in his expression serious in the moonlight. Sophia Montgomery, I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. But I'm beginning to think there's no such thing as a perfect moment, just perfect certainty about who you want to spend your life with. He opened the box to reveal a ring unlike any Sophia had seen before, not a traditional diamond, but a deep blue sapphire surrounded by tiny pearls set in gold. It reminded me of your eyes, Zach explained softly, and of how you shine brightest when surrounded by your students, just as this stone does among the pearls. Tears blurred Sophia's vision as he continued, I love you, your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you've made a place for yourself here, and I want to make a place for us together. Will you marry me? Yes, Sophia whispered, her voice catching. Yes, with all my heart. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into an embrace that felt like coming home, Sophia marveled at the journey that had brought her here. The bride who had been turned away for her scars had found a man who saw strength in everyone, and in doing so, had found not just love but herself. Their wedding took place in May, when the hills were carpeted with wildflowers, and the promise of summer hung in the air. The entire town turned out for the occasion, the small church overflowing with well-wishers. Sophia wore a simple gown of ivory silk, her hair arranged with sprigs of baby's breath, her scars visible and unimportant on the happiest day of her life. Mayor Thompson performed the ceremony, his wife beaming from the front pew. Mrs. Beckett, who had appointed herself unofficial mother of the bride, dabbed at her eyes throughout the service. The schoolchildren, granted a holiday for the occasion, giggled and whispered as they watched their teacher become Mrs. Reid. I take you, Sophia, to be my lawfully wedded wife. Zach's voice rang clear and strong as he spoke his vows. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. When Sophia repeated the same words, her voice steady despite the emotion filling her heart, she felt as if she were making not just a promise but a declaration that love sees beyond surfaces, that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the longest journeys lead exactly where we're meant to be. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Mayor Thompson declared. You may kiss your bride. As Zach's lips met hers, sealing their vows with a kiss that held both tenderness and passion, the congregation erupted in cheers and applause. Among the jubilant faces, Sophia caught sight of Gerald Holloway, standing at the back of the church with an expression of bewilderment. For a moment, their eyes met, and Sophia felt a curious sense of gratitude toward the man whose rejection had set her on this unexpected path. Then Zach was leading her down the aisle and out into the spring sunshine, where their future awaited, not the future she had once imagined, but one infinitely more precious for being built on true seeing and genuine love. 5 years later, Sophia sat on the wide porch of the Reid ranch house, watching her husband chase their 3-year-old daughter through the summer twilight. Little Emma's laughter floated on the evening breeze as she dodged her father's playful attempts to catch her, her dark curls bouncing with each step. From inside the house came the sound of Mrs. Beckett's voice, instructing the newest addition to their family, 10-month-old James, on the finer points of bread dough, though the baby was far more interested in patting the flour with pudgy hands than absorbing culinary wisdom. The ranch had prospered under Zach's careful management, allowing them to build the additions he had promised: a library lined with bookshelves that held Sophia's growing collection, and a small music room where a piano had been installed last Christmas, to her delighted surprise. Sophia continued to teach, though now only 3 days a week, with a young woman from Denver handling the other 2 days. The arrangement allowed her to balance her love of teaching with her roles as wife and mother, a balance she had never imagined possible in her former life. "Mama, look." Emma called, racing toward the porch with something clutched in her small hand. "Papa found a butterfly." Sophia leaned forward as her daughter climbed onto her lap, opening her fingers to reveal a delicate monarch resting on her palm. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. But we must be gentle and let it go soon so it can find its family." "Can I show baby James first?" Emma asked, her blue eyes so like her father's wide with excitement. "Of course, just be very careful." As Emma scampered inside, Zach climbed the porch steps and settled into the rocking chair beside Sophia's. "That girl's got more energy than a new colt," he remarked with proud affection. "Must get it from her mother." Sophia laughed. "I think we both know which parent she takes after, especially when it comes to finding creatures to bring home." Zach reached over to take her hand, his thumb brushing over the sapphire ring that now shared space with a gold wedding band. "Thinking deep thoughts this evening?" "Just grateful ones," Sophia replied, squeezing his hand. "Do you remember what today is?" He nodded, his expression softening. 5 years since we met, since I found a beautiful, lost woman standing outside Gerald Holloway's abandoned homestead." "I wasn't lost," Sophia corrected gently. "I just hadn't found my way yet." "Well, I'm mighty glad your way led to me." Zach leaned over to press a kiss to her temple, right where the most prominent of her scars began its path down her cheek. "Every day, I thank God for giving Gerald Holloway the poor judgment to run off when he saw you." "As do I," Sophia admitted with a smile. "Though at the time it felt like the end of all my hopes." And now, she looked around at the home they had built together, the thriving ranch, the children's toys scattered across the porch, the evidence everywhere of a life rich with purpose and love. "Now I know it was just the beginning." From inside came the sound of Emma's excited voice showing the butterfly to her baby brother, followed by Mrs. Beckett's gentle admonition not to get flour on the poor creature's wings. Soon they would all gather around the dinner table, sharing the day's stories and plans for tomorrow. Later, Zach would read to Emma while Sophia nursed James to sleep. Then the two of them would sit on this same porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. It wasn't the life Sophia had been raised to expect, nor the one she had desperately sought when she boarded that train to Rattlesnake Springs. It was something far better, a life built on seeing truly and being truly seen, on finding strength in scars and beauty in unexpected places. As if reading her thoughts, Zach leaned close again, his voice low and meant for her alone. "I love you, Sophia Reid, every part of you, every scar, every smile, every stubborn opinion, every tender moment with our children." "And I love you," she whispered back, "for teaching me that our wounds don't define us, but the people who see beyond them help us define ourselves." As the sun sank behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Sophia rested her head against her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that sometimes the most beautiful destinations are found only after we've been turned away from the paths we thought we were meant to travel.